Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We've made it to the final episode of our little mini-series of Rift's Dinosaur Swamp. We're going to go through and talk a little bit about who the villains and critters that stock this setting that you as a game master prospectively can use to stock and write your adventures around if you're trying to go for a canon depiction of the setting. Obviously, because of his proximity to Virginia and Maryland, Archie's going to be a background presence no matter what, especially because you have Cimmerians in the northern part of the Dinosaur Swamp setting, and also the various robot creatures that are spread across the East Coast, all the way down as far south as Georgia and Florida even. There's a robot spy in the Liberated Underground group, the Eleutherian Underground, or I can't remember what they call the organization. The True Atlanteans in Atlanta. They have a Archie spy amongst them. Archie has a big presence. Whether or not you want to use him as a villainous presence is entirely optional. He doesn't have designs on the land or anything like that. It's full of like large dangerous animals, so it's further down the list of parts of North America that Archie's focused on trying to rehabilitate or make some sort of claim to in terms of manipulating and directing human technological advancement and all that kind of stuff. Archie's responsible for a lot of the technology in the setting, kind of by the wayside because of like leaving little caches of technology out for people to find and retro engineer. From behind the scenes, Archie's had a huge impact on the North American setting. And so, this close to, Archie's, home base and central locations, you can't help but account a little bit for what Archie's doing. And as I said, the Cimmerians are there. The Cimmerians are kind of both, viewed as heroes, but are also simultaneously feared by a lot of the Barbarian Tribes. They're intimidating and alien and mysterious. I feel like if your players aren't super familiar with Rifts, you can easily just kind of create the impression that the East Coast has a bunch of, weird cybernetic robotic aliens that aren't of earthly origin, and that the Cimmerians are just one of those. If you're actually trying to, portray the mystery and the false image that a lot of Archie's creations, put on, so that no one realizes that there's a hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence with a robot army just chilling on the East Coast. Of the various barbarian tribes that are described in the Dinosaur Swamp books, the ones that are probably the most villainous would be your Wolf Runners or your Devil Horde, especially the Devil Horde. The Wolf Runners are kind of maybe a bit more of a question mark. Devil Horde definitely kind of would operate a bit as raiders, despite the fact that they're all kind of culturally attached to Durham and Raleigh. That doesn't mean that they stay there 24/7 all year long. They will range out and act as bandits and whatnot. Attacking each other, attacking settlements, going on hunts, all that kind of stuff. There's lots of occasions where they can be encountered as antagonists to whatever goal the players are trying to achieve. Most of Char's gangs, they're all criminal organizations, so they can all be used as villains to some degree or another. The one that's the most villainous would be the Raptors Claws. They're run by a DB, reptilian of unspecified origin named Catalyst, who has basically turned the organization into a slaver organization, kidnapping people, selling them to the Atlantean slave trade run by the Gorth. And, quite obviously he's the most, key threat within Char in terms of, things that gangs are doing and the threats they might, pose to the common man kind of a thing. But also, he serves as, part of, a network of NPCs that kind of establish, the presence of the Gorth Atlantis in Dinosaur Swamp as well. It's not just the true Atlantean renegades who are trying to, filter escaped alien slaves out of Atlantis. But Atlantis itself is right here, and beyond the Horun being right offshore, and frequently liking to come into the land to hunt the native wildlife. You know, the Gorth frequently, you know, come to the area to collect barbarian slaves and all that kind of stuff and take them back, you know, to be sold on their market for food or sport, entertainment, or labor, or whatever it is they're doing with them. And Catalyst, you know, is a keystone NPC to help players kind of like learn about and or unravel this conspiracy, you know, that threatens, once again, the common man of Char. And some of the material about the Raptor Claws, it mentions that there's a Splugorth slaver base off the coast of Virginia, which is, as far as I can recall, not mentioned in any of the other source material for the East Coast. So you can either treat that as like maybe it's like a brand new base that hasn't really been like dug in yet, or you're just gonna have to freeball it, and it's just been there, and it just hasn't been mentioned in any of the other Rift books, because it's not like they can detail every last square inch of the planet. In either case, that location is not gonna serve them well in the long term. They are like way too close to the heart of Archie's power that he's not gonna end up conveniently having some occasion for a bunch of Shimerians to show up and just bombard the hell out of the base. So. Right nearby to Char is like this odd little area around a town called Hickory, where a ancient chaos demon who calls himself Silas Skinwalker has a little area called the Kingdom of the Dead. As I mentioned in like the previous video, he's pretty kind of just isolationist and self-focused. He doesn't seem to have like grand designs to conquer the land. He mostly just wants to be left alone. So like, instead of using him as an antagonist, he'd be kind of like a good, unlikely ally to show up, potentially, especially if you're going to be doing Minion War stuff, because as much as he doesn't want to be fucked with, he doesn't want to be fucked with by a bunch of Hadean or Devalian, you know, fiends, any more so than he wants, you know, local people from the ruins of Char coming around and poking around in his business. So, you know, likely also Nero, the dragon that rules Ash. Despite that he is, like, you know, a little antagonistic in his presentation, and also has all this stuff going on where he's kind of like pretending to be someone, a more older and more experienced dragon to the people of Camp Cherokee. I feel he also like is not necessarily like a bad guy that the characters are going to need to take out. Kind of more like your antagonistic administrative NPC almost, and also someone who could end up being an unlikely friend in case the Minion War, you know, is a storyline that you want to play with in your Dinosaur Swamp adventuring. Someone who is likely to, like, maybe come to the aid and defense of Char, and especially Camp Cherokee. He might, you know, appreciate having this manipulative relationship over them, and isn't going to want them to see them all taken away by a Hell Pit Overlord. There's a bandit group called the Arclight Brigade. They camp out near Char. They kind of reveal one of Char's main NPCs, the head of the Operators Guild, a man by the name of Father Nicholas. They kind of shine him out to be himself, you know, a bit nefarious, because he's got to deal with them where, like, he'll give them information on cargo and traders moving in and out of the Char, and where they're going to be going and when they can be found, so that the Arclight Brigade can strike them and take their stuff and kill them all. And in exchange for that information, the Operators Guild gets to go and take all the scrap, which, wow, that's a great motivation to be just selling out the lives of innocent people. But, you know, hey, that's what great villains are made for, supposedly. And, you know, and there, so you know, you can use them as part of, like, unraveling the villainy behind Father Nicholas, and, like, proving, you know, the connection between them. Or they could just be just a random encounter of just bandits, you know, in the jungle as they're moving from point A to point B. Another group that roams around, there's a band of Splugorth minions under the command of a Sunaj assassin, which is a group of true Atlantean traders named Zash Danzas. He was like, you know, a spy who was friends of the leader of the true Atlanteans that are in Atlanta right now. And he's looking for their new location. He doesn't know that they're there. He's, you know, someone that you can find potentially as a friendly encounter in Char or some other civilized place like Macon or Fort Hawkins. where he's not necessarily hostile and he's not, you know, with a Splenkrith slave barge and a bunch of Altair warrior women and a bunch of other things that would like make it obvious that he's palling around with Lord Splenkrith, but likewise could add a little flavor and context for a random encounter if the player characters do run into a Splenkrith slaver squad, and you have a Sunaj there, and you have something to discover and learn about if the characters actually manage to best them somehow in combat, and or take prisoners or find out information, lead to other things. You can use them for all sorts of plot hooks. Also, once again, in the Minion War scenario, could potentially be an unlikely ally in terms of Splenkrith. Like, as soon as Hellord Payne tries to openly attack Atlantis, and they realize where his base is, you know, there's going to be a lot of assets deployed to the Dinosaur Swamp to take out that Hell Pit. And that Zash Danzis is likely to be, like, you know, since he's already there, you know, a keystone figure and all of that. So use that as you will. In terms of the Minion War, if you're going to be like engaging in it, there's 3 people, NPC-wise, that you kind of need to have like some, like, you know, grasp of over what their various plans and agendas are. Obviously, Overlord Shard, who's there in the setting even prior to the Minion War, because he's the devil in charge of Ciudad del Diablo in Cuba, as I talked about in the previous video on this subject. He's a bit loco in the cabeza, let's say, but and he's like an ominous threat, controls like a growing naval force, is more likely to use spies and subterfuge to try to take out Overlord Payne. If you want to be cheap and do like the rather obvious thing they did with True Atlanteans, you know, having a base in Atlanta, you could have the Devil Horde barbarians potentially become minions of Overlord Shard and the devils that he sends into the Dinosaur Swamp region. Various other gangs aside from the Raptor Claws, since they're kind of like obviously going to be more associated with the Splenkrith end of the whole war. But maybe you could do like the Gearheads or one of the more corruptibles, even the Operators Guild, since they kind of have pseudo-religious kind of overtones to how they style themselves. They could be maybe a good source for some behind-the-scenes devilish manipulation going on. Hellord Payne is more of a blunt instrument, like most of the demon Hellords on Earth. You actually like look at their plans and their motivations, and my oh my, what a bunch of just meat-headed idiots. Like half of his force is going to be over in Atlantis, and in the book it says that his hell pit is in South Carolina, near the shoreline, in the marshy areas along the coast. There's no ley line nexuses there, and along the entirety of the South Carolina coastline. There's a few ley lines, but there's no points where they cross. And I was under the impression that you actually need that to dig a hell pit. The only within South Carolina, the only like major ley line nexus that isn't like claimed otherwise is kind of in the middle of the Steel Tree Forest. It's probably the source of where that forest came from. That's sandwiched right in between Camp Cherokee and Camp and Char, so it'll, you know, kind of, you know, put them like directly both a imminent threat to both of those places as well as under imminent threat for both those places retaliating. I mean, they should have put it in Georgia at the Ocmulgee Mounds. This would be my pull if I were to like change that for my own purposes. Or you could play it as Hellord Payne is an idiot and isn't really taking the whole building a hell pit part of the program seriously, and so that's why they're building some muddy pit in a location where it's not even going to be able to be activated properly, and is instead sending most of his armed forces into Atlantis to stir up a bee's hive that will have long-term ramifications for the Splenkrith's footing for the entire, you know, Earth theater of the war. So, you know, good luck with that guy. One of the things to consider is when like looking through, you know, the stats and the numbers of personnel and stuff that are involved in Hellord Payne's demon army, is the numbers that they list for like human slaves being used to work at the Hell Pit and mercenaries and other kind of stuff like that. They've either brought in a bunch of people, or they're going to end up snatching up a significant portion of Dinosaur Swamp's limited humanoid population in order to be able to match those numbers. Like entire tribes, like the Bulldog, the Bullhound, mutant barbarians of the Steel Tree Forest, like chunks of people from Camp Cherokee, raids on Char, you suck up the entirety of like the Wolf Runners and maybe the three smaller Native American tribes like the Catawba and the Lumbee and the Creek. You might be able to like get up to the amount of people needed to match the amount of slaves it says they have, which like decimates the population of the region. So how you want to deal with that? Have the Hell Lord locally sourced his labor force, or are these people that are being brought through from other dimensions that his Hell army has already, been more victorious in, because most dimensions don't have all the mega damage technology and weirdness that comes along with Rift's Earth. But ultimately, just like even without like any sort of like miraculous Disney sunshine, Camp Cherokee and Char and Ash and Bone and all the people of the Carolinas and Georgia get together and hold hands and use the power of friendship to destroy Hell Lord Pain and his Hell Pit. Even if you don't do any of that kind of stuff, it's going to get the attraction of the Shimmerians pretty hardcore, and through them, obviously, the attention of Archie, since they are Archie. And it's going to get the attention of Atlantis and the Splugorth, and there's a whole island full of Kitani. If anything, Hell Lord Pain buys Overlord Shard some breathing room, because he'll end up pulling off a lot of resources off of Cuba that belong to the Splugorth and the Horoon to go, destroy Overlord Pain, Hell Lord Pain. And in the process, there'll be that many less ships trying to blockade the islands of Cuba that Overlord Shard controls. And so, like, he'll be able to disperse even more of his Devil Navy and all that kind of stuff. Beyond your Overlord Shard and beyond your Hell Lord Pain, the other like big NPC to keep included in your mind when dealing with the Minion War aspect of running a Dinosaur Swamp campaign is Lord Splenkrith. Even though he's afar, he's got his tentacles in a whole lot of pies, let's say, and so you should kind of be considering like his tactical reaction to what's going on the ground. Like I say, Overlord Hellord Pain taking a good chunk of his military forces to go stage attacks on Splen and other cities inside of Atlantis, that they will in all likelihood get traced back to where they started off at, and that's exactly the sort of thing that gives him the excuse to cut loose. At the beginning of the Minion War, the Splugorth, they're interdimensional traders. They don't necessarily want to be seen to be taking like one side or the other or being the aggressor. But as soon as someone's attacked them, suddenly they have much more of a justification to unleash their vast military assets. The real threat to Rift's Earth as a setting, caused by the Minion War, is that the Splugorth get pushed to a point where they just say screw it and just like massively dump Kidians and Kitani into the dimension and basically overwhelm everything else, because they have an incredible amount of assets that could overwhelm any other force that's currently staged on Earth in this version of Earth. A few other things you want to think about for that aren't like necessarily like active villains, but obviously there's dinosaurs in Dinosaur Swamp. I would recommend trying to be like a little less cheesy about it, and they're animals. They're not necessarily out to be hurt. They don't necessarily have to be shot down to 0 hit points before they'll go away. Some of the smaller predators are probably the ones that are most likely to actively really want to like hunt human-sized food, and the smarter ones will probably learn to avoid the ones in the big hard metal shells that have guns all over them. So a modicum of armaments, like, you know, should be enough to like dissuade most dinosaurs from trying to like, you know, do the Peter Jackson King Kong bullshit where like these Tyrannosaurus Rexes are just so insistent on eating the people despite the fact that they're hanging from all these vines and being beaten up by a giant gorilla. Like, you know, we can do better about dinosaurs. The dinosaurs in this setting are depicted as the classic fantasy featherless dinosaurs of yore, as opposed to the more modern and quote unquote accurate depiction of dinosaurs that people are kind of trying to enroll into media. How you want to play that as a GM is up to you. If you want to describe all the dinosaurs as being the feathered version, fine. Or like maybe they're, you know, let's lean into the fact that they are fantasy dinosaurs in the way that there are, you know, beings and rifts that come from fantasy worlds like elves and dwarves and all that kind of stuff. Also of note in these books, take note of the plant life. There's a couple different kinds of like meat-eating plants. There's a type of fairies that are associated with one of those meat-eating plants. And also a whole host of diseases and virulent plagues that one could catch while mucking around down there in the marshes and swamps of the southeastern United States. So, I guess that wraps it up. I'm not sure what the next little bit of Rift's lore I want to go through. I've already done a video just as like a buying guide for books that you would need to like do a fully fleshed out Lone Star or a Poland setting, so I'm not really sure if, I mean, it'd be like worth the time and how redundant it would be to make more videos on either of those two areas. But I could do Atlantis next. I could do England. Maybe, I don't know, the American Southwest kind of falls under the umbrella of Lone Star in many ways. Could do like Northern Michigan. Could do South America. I'm quite happy with the South American setting. It's like second to North America in terms of just having a weird collage of stuff to do. In spite of the power creep he introduced, C.J. Corella, you know, added some good stuff to Rifts, I still say. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Leave comments below about your thoughts on all of this. Let me know what you think of the things I mentioned, like what you might want to see as my next little exploration of like of, you know, the actual like what's on the ground in these settings of Rift's lore, and hit like and subscribe and all that other good stuff. Be sure to, no matter what anyone else tells you to do, that you stay waspinated.